And I appreciate the fact that Bobby's sister Nancy has agreed to this because she's on the West Coast. Not only do we have the time change, but we have daylight savings time, so she had to get up really early for us. I'd also like to just mention that there's an envelope that's gone around as an honorarium for our author for being generous to do this for us today, as well as an envelope for the donations for the East Middles Junior School, right? Middle school. And we do that every year. We've been doing that for 20 years, and every year we collect money and we bring it to the school, and they buy books for the kids. So we're very happy to be able to do that. The other thing I just want to mention is when we're ready for the author, she's going to give a talk as well as a little slide presentation. After she's done with the questions, we're having to have questions and answers. Please come up to the microphone because she can't hear and she can't see you if you're in the back. So if you have questions about her book, please come up to the microphone. Thank you again for coming and thank you for supporting the Naples Heritage Book Club. First, I'd like to tell you that last summer, when we were looking for an author for our luncheon, Bobby generously loaned me book 1 of the trilogy and said, when you read this, and I loved it. I couldn't wait to finish it. And then I said, okay, I need book 2. Then I read book 2. Well, last month, I said, I have to finish this trilogy because I need to know what happened to these characters. So she gave me book 3, which was 800 pages. And I loved it. So I hope that you loved book 1 as much as I loved all 3 of them. And we're so very happy that Bobby's sister Nancy agreed to be our published author today. And with that, I'd like to introduce Bobby E., who will introduce her sister Nancy. Thank you again for coming.
Can you see me, Nancy?
Yes, I can.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. We're glad you're here. Thank you, Sean.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Joyce. Thank you, Mary Mansfield, and all of you. We're so glad that you're all here today. And my name's Bobby Eve, and I am going to introduce my sister Nancy. Born in New York City in 1949, Nancy is the oldest of the 6 kids in our family. Our father was in the railroad business, and every time he got promoted, we moved. There were multiple moves before Nancy started school. As a result, Nancy went to 8 schools before college, which was Denison University in Ohio, where she earned a degree in French. Her first job was at Pan Am in New York City as an international flight attendant. As children, we often traveled by train, and the international travel fed her love of languages, ancient history, and archaeology. Then she worked at a couple of Wall Street firms before deciding to return to school to get a PhD in French and comparative literature. However, our father didn't think he should pay for that. So she got a job as a cocktail waitress and a student loan. Survival became an issue rather quickly, however. So she aimed to get a job in a business that had a training program that traditionally hired men, but where women were being recruited. She was accepted into the management training program at Manufacturers Hanover Trust, a bank which was absorbed through mergers into what is now J.P. Morgan Chase. While there, she got an MBA in Finance and International Business from NYU at night. She rose to VP and group executive in large corporate lending, first traveling to see clients in the Midwest and then the West Coast, staying with Manufacturers Hanover for nearly 12 years before leaving to go out on her own as a consultant in Los Angeles and then Las Vegas, working with old banking contacts until, as she says, they were retired, dead, or politically irrelevant. Along the way, she worked with an old client who bought into an insurance agency, and she became a health insurance agent, which she still does part-time today, along with designing closets for Closet World, known here for their franchises called Closets by Design. Never meeting the right guy at the right time, she is aunt to 9, grand aunt to 5, soon to be 6. Her kids are of the feline variety. Over the years, Dusty, Misty, Mozart, Midnight, Monkey, Marshmallow, and Minx have enriched her life. You may recognize some names from the books. Marshmallow and Minx are her current companions. So now, let me turn this over to Nancy, also known as Noelle, for her to begin. Thank you.
Thanks, Bobby. I want to thank you all for coming today, and a special thanks to Mary Mansfield for making me feel comfortable, and to Sean Walsh for helping me navigate technology. 3 of your members helped me by volunteering to be beta readers, finding typos and suggesting edits to keep me on track. Leanne Tate, Susan Ribos, and of course my sister Bobby, who, along with my other sister Ruth and my sister-in-law Vicky, have been my biggest supporters. Bobby especially has been a coach and a tireless advocate. I'm so lucky to have you as a sister. So now, let's get on to why I'm here, Secrets of Ravenshire. Now, let me hope I can make this happen here. Name. Well, our original name was Beaufort, and I've always loved Christmas, so I wanted to write under a pen name, so this just seemed to fit, Noelle de Beaufort. And so Secrets of Ravenshire, the Gabriella trilogy is the first in what will be more trilogies, with prequel trilogies and sequel trilogies. The first one, Romance and Revenge, is in 1811, Temptation and Treachery, 1811 to 1812, and Venom and Valor, 1812 to 1813. I assume I think you've seen the book covers. So what I wanted to do with the book covers is have it instantly show that it's something historical. And I did this all myself on a thing called Canva, which is a free design page. They also have, you can upgrade to a paid, but I wanted to make sure I understood how to do this, so I wasn't relying on people all the time, every time I changed my mind or had something else, that I have to go and keep paying this and paying that. So it's slow, but I got there. And so this is the way I like to present it. So I'm going to structure this talk basically on the questions I get a long time. What was your initial inspiration? How did the books evolve? What's your process? How do you decide what point of view to use? The characters, simultaneous actions going on different times in different places. What's the overall series plan? And what's next? So this was a long time ago. In 1996, I saw an ad in some magazine, I don't remember, that had a deadline of April something, 15th or whatever. And I thought, oh, you've been saying you're going to write a novel forever. So here's an opportunity. You either do it or you stop talking about it. So I decided to write a historical novel about a woman ahead of her time, because I didn't want to get into all the contemporary things with cell phones and all that stuff. I wanted there to be more suspense. And for that, I needed it to be harder to communicate. And she needed a very wealthy and indulgent father who could afford to let her thwart societal conventions. I didn't want her to be trapped in that situation. And I wanted him, that's why I had him start a trading company, because I didn't want him to be a provincial gentleman. I wanted him to have seen the world and have many people from many races and many cultures involved in his businesses. So the original name was Whispers of the Past, and it was about 400 pages and 100,000 words. Now it's, God knows, much, much bigger than that. But then I didn't win. And I was like, what do you mean I didn't win? Who are you? What do you mean? So I researched the publishing business after the fact, and there's so many steps to getting an agent and a publisher and this and that. And they have limitations on all this stuff. So I just put that on the shelf. So then about 20 years ago, as my consulting stuff was kind of ending, I took some writing courses, and the teacher loved the book, but I just didn't think it was ready. So back in those days when people sent out physical newsletters and Borders was in existence, they had a newsletter about a critique group. So I thought, well, that's what I should do. So I joined that in about 2004. And this was a group that had a retired CIA agent, a retired LA firefighter, a former cop who is a casino boss now, and another guy from a casino, and a real estate guy, and women who were artists, and a woman who'd been in the army and was also a teacher. I mean, a really eclectic group. But when I said I was writing romance, which I thought I was because I didn't really know, it really was a family saga, but their eyes rolled. They thought, oh my God, we're going to have to listen to this stuff. But as the book went on, they started to say, gee, I didn't think I was going to like this, but I started to look forward to the characters. I want to look, see what happens next. So I figured that this maybe, might work. So after I did the first book, I still didn't think it was ready. So I decided to write prequels to see what the adults like Henry and Gwyneth were like as children and what shaped them. And I joined a local chapter of the Romance Writers, even though I wasn't writing romance, because they had great speakers and one-day courses that were very valuable. One on self-editing, and especially this one on psychological motivation and character traits, looking at the flaws and strengths, because I tended in the beginning to make everybody too nice. And I realized that if you're going to go off on adventures all the time, then there's got to be a negative. Yeah, you've got initiative and you're open-minded and you're going all the world, but you're always leaving people behind. There's a selfish quality to that about your other responsibilities. So then it started to be more balanced. And then I watched Game of Thrones. I don't know how many of you are Game of Thrones fans, but at the end of that first season, that jaw-dropping finale, I went out and bought all the books. They're like 1,000 pages. And I said, hey, I can have as many people as I want in this story. I don't have to be limited. And that's when it kind of exploded into 3 books. And then Amazon revolutionized the public publishing business. And it seemed possible because it doesn't cost me anything to put it up on Amazon. It's published on demand. So when they get an order, they print it. So there's no, garages full of books that you can't sell, or, returns from bookstores because it didn't sell or anything like that, which makes it a lot easier. So the process is the classic girl meets boy structure. Conflict turns into love. And as I took these courses, I realized there are 2 general categories of writers. They call them plotters and pantsers. Now, plotters are mystery writers, for instance. They build on specific events and clues and have a very intricate plot. Pantsers, who write by the seat of their pants, I actually prefer the word organic. Something in life happens and a character reacts. Not even I knew what was going to happen until I wrote it. I did not think the 3rd book was going to end the way it did. I did not think that was going to be what happened. But as it went on, they say the characters take over, and they kind of did. And so writing for me is really like watching a movie. When I did the first one, it was like I was right there in the room. Oh, look, this guy's over here, this guy's over there. And it just all kind of flowed. New characters, pop in out of nowhere wanting to be heard. You know, Ernest Hemingway wrote, "The only kind of writing is rewriting." If I had had any idea how many times I would write every single sentence in all of these 3 books, I'm sure I never would have started. But anyway, in points of view, I didn't want to write first person because but I didn't really want to write all omniscient either, or just 2 or 3 limited characters. I wanted all the characters' voices and inner thoughts to be clear. So I have many key people reacting to events simultaneously. So to keep track of it, initially I used dates and location and speaker before each scene, just so I could keep track of what I was doing. And so I decided to keep it. I think it's easier to keep all these crazy things going. And it's kind of like Columbo. The readers know more than the characters do until the characters figure it out for themselves. In terms of developing characters, I immediately imagined Jean-Louis, Henry, Gwyneth, and Gabriella. Jean-Louis was the name of my first boss, and he was a totally pragmatic, this is life, get over it, get used to it, and adjust. And so he was great. And so I've got a massive file on names, genealogy, hair color, eye color, because in the beginning I have one character with blue eyes here and green eyes there. And I thought, look, I've got to keep track of this. Very complicated. I had people who were in the wrong generations being contemporary stuff. So that took a while to get that straightened out. And when I wrote the prequels, I came up with Gio, who was originally called Antonio, but I like Gio better. And I went round and round with names before settling on Blackbird. Now, if you are a Game of Thrones person, you obviously know that Gio is based on Tyrion from the Game of Thrones, who's a dwarf, who is really the center of the whole Game of Thrones thing. So my background is in corporate banking and consulting, so I made Gabriella a financial whiz who secretly acts as her father's man of affairs, which of course is scandalous to everyone who eventually finds out. I mentioned before, I made everybody too nice in the beginning, so I wanted to try to make them more fully formed people. Romance is basically a happily ever after formula, but I don't think life is like that. But I do believe that no cause is ever lost and no one is born evil. Even those who seem evil in the book were shaped by events in their past that warped them into evil actions. Jean-Louis is a particular favorite of mine, as is Gio. And I wrote 3 short stories about Jean-Louis that were published in 3 anthologies put out by a Las Vegas Writers Club. And I may do more and put them in a separate book later, like Nambotha or Nashmere or some other characters. Since characters pop into scenes at will and actions happening in different times and places, I try to keep action immediate through differing characters' points of view. And it's written kind of like scenes in a movie or a long-term series, which hope so. One day, you never know. Books 2 and 3 have much more action in different locations than just London or Ravenshire. The Cotswolds approximates the location of Ravenshire west of London. And then later, I've got people in Madagascar, Paris, America, North Africa, long ocean voyages, all complicated by the difficulty of travel in the early 19th century due to the Napoleonic Wars and limited technology. Research was critical. Learning how far horses, camels went, that's about 25 miles a day. And coaches, they can go about 50 miles before changing horses. So that's how those inns and coach houses started up. And then I found a great site that had travel times for ancient sailing ships. So I could move characters from one place to another. Now these are the short story covers about Jean-Louis, and the books had to have some connection to Nevada. So I looked up when was the earliest white man in Nevada, and it was in 1774. So this worked out perfectly for Jean-Louis, 1784. He was a Frenchman who was subsequently a Canadian trapper, and he traveled all over Canada, And so he made his way down to Nevada. It's a story about meeting someone on his travels and meeting this snow tribe, which is based on the Paiutes. And then at the end, beyond the books, these dates are 18, 25, 26, and 27 are the ones at the end where he leaves England and goes back to find the tribe to live with them, and runs into, of course, he had runs into people from before who also ended up, you know, in the San Francisco area, San Francisco, Reno, you know, that area. So the overall series plan, the origins, this Lucius Ventus was supposedly in family myth the first person who was the sailing, you know, guru to Julius Caesar. And so Ventus means wind. Windward was the family name. And supposedly he followed a raven to the location of Ravenshire because he wanted to stay and not go back to Rome. Yes.
You know, you are still on the first slide.
Oh, I've been pressing them and they're not going forward.
You're not going forward, so it still says Secrets of Ravenshire. It doesn't.
All right. All right. Let me see what I can do here. Okay. I'm sorry. I was just going on and on. These are
Now they're changing.
yeah, I was changing it on my computer, but it didn't seem to show up because it didn't work unless I went to the thing. I'm so sorry.
Well, I should have told you sooner.
Yeah, I'm just blabbing on and on. Okay, hold on. So this is where I was. All right, so now I'm into the overall series plan. Sorry.
Okay, good.
So I may do stuff in ancient Rome or the Dark Ages or medieval times when Ravenshire Castle was originally built, or short stories or something. I don't know. I'm going to do prequel trilogies and possibly maybe some short stories in that time period. I'm currently working on the Young Viscount trilogy. This is what Henry was called by his friends when he, you know, you were a Viscount before you would become an Earl. And this is about Henry and Gwyneth's children, with Geo as a presence throughout their lives. Now, I'm currently planning to end this with Henry returning from Canada with Jean-Louis and Luc de Mirbeau when Brie is 3. And that's, if you've read the first books, that's where she stands there with her hands on her hips and says, "You're never going anywhere without me again." And then I'm going to go forward from the current thing to Brazil, Africa, America. And then I'm going to go back and do Gwyneth from the time she was 3 until 1811 when the series started. So I've got about 50 years worth of projects here. And so, you know, I've got to keep getting bionic parts or something to make all this stuff happen. So what's next? Okay. These are the covers for the next, it's the next series. I've got 1768 to 1774 is Ghosts and Gallantry. That's from the time Richard is born until Henry goes off to university. Then Ideals and Illusions when Henry's at university from 1774 to 1779. And then Discovery and Destiny when Henry goes on his first voyage in 1779 and returns, you know, and all the period things that happen up until 1792. And these are the covers for those books. But right now I'm still only, you know, I've written them, but now I've got to edit them. And, you know, what I wrote 20 years ago has changed a lot with different characters and things that have happened. So, that's where I'm going. And questions and answers.
Good job. This is Joyce Petzler. I so enjoyed the books. I read all 3 of them. I was amazed at several things. One, the development of the characters are just so incredible. And there's so many characters. You have to really kind of keep track of them as you go forward from book to book. But I also loved all the little tidbits of history that you put into the book. I mean, it was marvelous. So I just wanted to thank you. You've done a great job. I hope everybody else gets to read the other two books because I couldn't put them down. Does anybody else have questions? Come up or comments? Feel free to come up. No? Yeah. Why don't you come up, Paula?
Hi. When I borrowed the book from Bobby, your first one, and I started to read it, I recognized the time period through a popular television series, Bridgerton.
Right.
So when they said the Ton, I thought, oh, I know about the Ton and about the seasons, you know, the seasons where the young women were presented. And so that kind of gave me a little bit of a background. Your story is totally different, wonderful, very, very well described and researched, and I enjoyed it very much. And I'm looking forward to reading the second and the third one now. But do you often get comments at all about the fact that there is another series out there on television that explores that same time period, which for me gave it more depth or background within your story?
Well, people, I wrote this before Bridgerton, and there are a lot of romance books about this period. I don't know why they picked this particular one to do with Bridgerton. I guess she had a good agent or something who got it into the system. And there were some people of color who were, in the society, but it was really very, very limited. And mine is kind of more what the history was. So I tried to bring in other people from other cultures to deepen it that were believable,
Well, for me, Bridgerton just gave me a context for your stories.
Okay.
And yours were very well written. And so
Thank you.
And I'm going to get the next one. Thank you.
Oh, good. Actually, I liked the first one. I think the second was better. And I think I did an even better job on the third one. So I feel I'm going in the right direction. So I'm glad you guys like it. I just thought as long as you don't have any questions, I could add something. When I was in the fourth grade, I took piano lessons from a woman who was in the Cleveland Symphony. And she must have married a patron of the arts, because we lived in Lakewood, Ohio, and the lake was only a couple blocks away. We were not in any mansion by any stretch of the imagination, but very, very close to us were these huge mansions on the lake. And that's where this woman lived. And I was literally in walking distance. So I walked in the first day, and it was built like a castle. It was stone. And I walked in, there's a suit of armor from the 15th century by this huge staircase, like from out of Gone with the Wind, And on the right side was the parlor, and on the left side was the music room. And this is what I used to base the music room in Gwyneth's house on, because I've never forget this room. This was the first story was really 2 stories high. There were floor-to-ceiling windows in it, and at the back there was floor-to-ceiling bookcases with a ladder, and there were 2 concert grand pianos end to end in this room. Oriental rugs, antiques, the whole thing. It was just a jaw-dropping room, a little bit intimidating to somebody in the 4th grade. And when we moved to Washington, D.C., my mother arranged piano lessons with this lady who lived in Georgetown in like a 2nd floor walk up in a studio apartment, which was certainly very different from that experience. Now, I stopped taking piano lessons. I had other things I was interested in, but Bobby and my sister Ruth they're both very good. They can sit down and play a piano anytime. But that's just an example of what I, kind of when I thought of these rooms, I wanted to have that room somewhere in it. And I didn't use history. History is more of a background character, but I'd be constantly asking myself, okay, when was this invented? Can I use this? And now I realize I did make a mistake, a little anachronism there in books 2 and 3 when I talk about cork vests, because those really, I just realized, I found out those weren't invented till 1854. they really used like, they'd have pig bladders that were inflated with air that they would put on children and people when they went in the water. So every now and then I'm going to hit something like that. They used them on the Titanic, but it wasn't, they didn't have them in 1812 or 13. But any other questions?
I want to go back a couple hundred pages. In the prelude. It referenced the trunk in the house, the beach house on Long Island. So I was wondering if those diaries or the clothing, or what was it that linked you to your thoughts on Ravenshire, or if there were thoughts and link between the two? How did
Well,
what you found play a role in the writing of the books?
okay, so I didn't really find that. I made that all up.
Okay.
Okay. I
No,
mean, our grandfather lived in Seattle and there were 6 kids, and that's about the limit of that. But my idea was eventually Gabriella gets to America and all these trunks and things came with her. And Lawrence was the tutor,
okay.
and he was the one who wrote those and found other old diaries in the Ravenshire libraries.
Okay.
That was the link, and I haven't, brought those diaries yet because she's not living there.
We haven't gone back to that
Yeah.
yet. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm curious about your prodigiousness, how you write. You have such a varied career and background. Are you writing day and night?
No, that's why it takes so long. I mean, it was 2017 that the first one came out. And then 2019, and I really didn't intend for it to take another 5 years to finish it, but I just am doing so many things. I couldn't do it. I mean, in the beginning, I wrote the first book in 3 months. So the basic thing was there, but then when I started expanding it and then I'd add, well, this happened in this country and that country, and it's just very complicated, and I need at least a 4 or 5 hour stretch at one time to figure out where I am in the book, in time, what place am I in, how long is it really going to take from point A to point B. But I don't want it to take that long the next time, and I'm not going to make them as long, and I do have the 3 prequels, essentially, the basic things written in the characters. I've just got to bring it forward. So I'm hoping I can get out at least, I want to say 2 a year, but 1 a year. I mean, that's at least what I want to be able to do, because it's just, nobody wants to wait 5 years to read the next part of it. That is like Game of Thrones. I mean, how many years has he been writing that 6th book, So.
Which cat is that, Nancy?
Oh, this is Minx. Marshmallow likes to sleep on the bed and hide. She hasn't been in. She comes in sometimes to ask me for treats and stuff, but see, they're not used to having this whole clean desk over here. You can't see it, but I moved all the stuff out of the camera. It's just all this stuff is piled over on the other side. So.
Does she knock it all off the desk?
Oh yeah. That's when I have papers piled up, and then she'll push them over, and then everything's all over the floor, and I have to spend forever trying to figure out what goes with what after she does that. So it's time for me to get things straightened out. It's always time for me to get things straightened out, but I can't forget everything around me and focus on what I'm doing. So
Nancy, I had a question for you about Blackie. You said you needed a villain. And how did his mother meet Henry if her mother was a gypsy? That seems kind of strange. How did that all
her
happen?
mother wasn't a gypsy. The gypsy was her mother's friend.
Oh.
Galda was her mother originally. By this, she was a Nera in the later books, because she kept changing her name and her background. Morella was the gypsy. So I just figured all this out for the Ghosts and Gallantry. I had to figure out how I get Bridget, the daughter, into the house and how I can make it all work. So I have them have castles all over the place. You know, there's a castle in Scotland, there's a castle in Wales, and there's a castle in Ireland. So I had never written about the castle in Wales, so okay, now I figured out that's what I have to do because they were from Wales. Galda was from Wales. And so her backstory, which is somewhere in one of the first three books, the prequels, that I can't remember exactly, but you know, as she fell in love with some guy who got her pregnant, and then of course he abandoned her, and all these horrible things happened to her in life. But then she vowed that Bridget was never going to have a life like that. She was a baker and she baked, but she started out as a housemaid or something in, and then found a job in a bakery, and they taught her how to do things. And then she got a job in a doctor's house as a cook. And then they had quarters for the servants and their children. So Bridget went there, grew up. And then when the other staff's, children of the staff needed to have a nanny, she was retiring. That's how she got that job. And then they needed somebody at the castle for the staff children. And the butler of the doctor knew the butler at the castle. So he got Bridget a job in that castle taking care of those children. And this was when she was very young, like 14, 15. So then the Earl only came to visit that castle about once a year. So they came one summer. In fact, I'm just writing that part right now, where Henry is 6 and Gwyneth is 3. And, you know, Bridget likes, you know, she knows how to read and they're impressed with her. And she usually takes care of the staff children. But when the Earl comes, she takes care of his children. Then the Earl said, no, I want them to play with everybody. I want them to know other people. I don't want them to be isolated. So she takes them on all these different adventures and stuff. And then when Rebecca, who is Henry's mother, is pregnant with Richard, they ask her to come to Ravenshire to take care of Richard. So that's how I got her there. Does that answer your question?
Does. I have another question answered.
Okay.
How did you research all of the potions, and particularly the potion that Blackie takes to change the color of his eyes?
Well, I invented that, but then I found something that said maybe that was possible. So, and then I had to have something that made him seem that had a bad effect on it. And you know, so that's why he really acted a little bit out of character there when he was really getting totally enraptured with his own idea of disguise, and how, you know, how after he stopped doing that, then he came kind of back to normal. But originally I just made it up. And then I found out there was a rumor that there was something like that out there, but you know, who knows? That's all very mysterious, and it's kind of has to be because I don't have any other solution. And just for instance, you know, talking about how this stuff comes to me in the third book, when I have Blackburn finally getting away, and I just had him walking through the street wondering about what he was going to do. And then this little Zachy, this little urchin pops in, you know, and that's just kind of the way it happens. And then I really liked the kid, and I thought it was really fun. So, you know, who knows what's going to happen with them too. I mean, I just really like to delve deeply into these things. And I like to read long, complicated books myself. So that's what I wrote. And I'm glad that a lot of you really like it. Thank you. Any other questions?
Hi, Nancy. This is Susan Pablos.
Oh,
I
hi, how are you? Thank you so much for helping me.
sure being a proofreader really made me appreciate all the work that you did. Oh my
Oh,
God. Can't even
and
fathom.
you did too, because they're 800 pages.
But my question to you is, at what point in your life did you think you wanted to be a writer? Was it in childhood or was it later in your career or when? If you could tell us a little.
Well, I always loved to read, and I really loved Dickens. I remember I read like all the Dickens books one um, summer, and or most of them. I don't think I read all of them, but most of them. And this, so that when I came back to school, they said, okay, so why don't you give us your summer reading list? And so I put down all these books, and the teacher calls me and says, look, Nancy, this is a very adult reading list. I don't really believe you read these books. I said, well, I did. I don't know what to tell you. You know, I went to the library a lot. And you know, I loved reading always. My parents loved reading. Bobby and I, we were on this trip to Seattle to visit our grandfather once. And my father had been down visiting his father, and they had all these, he took back these books, the Edgar Rice Burroughs books. Now he wrote Tarzan, but he also wrote this great series, John Carter of Mars. And they've just butchered the movie. I don't know how they made such a terrible movie of that because it's such a great story. And so we started in the middle. I don't know why he picked with the Sword of Mars. And we just sat there. And my father was, he did speeches. He could spellbind you a little bit. And the way he read this book, it was so exciting. We could hardly wait for the next. And what is there to do on a train all day? You're just bouncing around, So um, we did that. And I loved those books. And I don't know if you ever read that book, that biography of Ronald Reagan called Dutch by a guy named Edmund Morris. It was roundly condemned by all of the critics and everything because he invented conversations because he didn't think that was any other way to understand Ronald Reagan. But he missed, to me, because he was, a literary snob, how important Edgar Rice Burroughs was to Ronald Reagan. It was his favorite author. He loved those books. And, when he was a lifeguard on the river in Illinois, he saved 77 people from drowning. I mean, think about that. I mean, I don't like everything he did, but that I was really, really impressive. And his favorite author was Edgar Rice Burroughs. So this Edmund Morris just completely discarded that, just, the low intellect who would want to read those books. But these books were all about one man changing the world. And that was his biggest influence, I think. And that guy totally missed it. Totally. So Edgar Rice Burroughs he wrote by the word, they were paid in these old magazines, and everything was a cliffhanger. So you'd come back and buy these magazines the next week. And that's, and so I kind of got hooked on that whole idea. And I know some people hate cliffhangers. I mean, I love them because I want to be involved. I want to know what happens next. I want to be surprised. So yes, and I majored in French, which is mostly literature, so I read all the French guys, and I read, I took classes on Shakespeare and Milton and the Romantic poets, the English Romantic poets, and I just always thought I'd write a book someday, but life intervenes, and I did actually outline a thriller once, and that's still out there, but it's a different kind of a thing. But like I say, when I saw the ad, I said, you've been saying this forever. So just either do it or stop talking about it. I mean, one of the things about moving so much is it just makes, I have to be flexible and adaptable. I never know what's going to happen next. So it's kind of like Indiana Jones, well, you'll figure it out, whatever happens. You can't sit around and worry about it. You just have to go do it. So finally I had time and I did it. And now I can just keep myself busy with this. I mean, I always have so many things to do. I can never get them done. So I'll just keep going.
Are there any other questions, Nancy? Well, Nancy, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us and being part of our book club. And
Thank
thank
you.
you for attending. And remember, readers are leaders.
That's a great line. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks.